But here's the real problem. This truth couldn't stay buried without reason. There was a reason history had burned it from the record. Claiming this birthright wouldn't just pit him against Daenerys or Cersei. It would wake powers even older than the Night King. And if the wrong person learned of it first, the North would burn, the South would kneel, and the Seven Kingdoms would fall to something neither fire nor steel could kill. The cold in the crypts was different that night. Thicker, heavier, as though it had weight. Jon's breath curled in front of him, but it wasn't from the air alone. His fingers, wrapped tightly around the torch handle, felt like they were trembling for reasons he couldn't name. Every step deeper into the tunnel scraped echoes into the dark, and the sound seemed to run ahead of him, bouncing back in whispers he couldn't quite understand. Ghost padded silently at his side, ears twitching, head low. The dire wolf never spooked easily, but tonight his growl was low and constant, like he knew they weren't alone. He stopped at an archway, almost too low for him to pass under, without bending. The stone above it had no stark direwolf, no sword-wielding statue, only that strange crown of shadow, jagged as a frozen mountain range. His hand brushed over it, and he swore the rock pulsed faintly, like it had a heartbeat. The carvings beyond were older than the first men's runes, symbols twisting together in shapes that made his head ache if he stared too long. In the center of the chamber was a slab, not quite a coffin, but not quite a throne, a hybrid of both, and on it the faint shimmer of metal. He moved closer, feeling the air grow warmer, not colder. The object lying there was not gold, not silver, but a dark, reflective metal like frozen water. It was a circlet, simple yet heavy-looking, etched with the same jagged peaks as the sigil outside. As Jon reached out, a voice, not a whisper, not a thought, but something in between, breathed through the chamber. Firstborn. The word wasn't the common tongue, but somehow he knew what it meant. His fingers brushed the circlet, and the torches along the wall flared to life all at once, their flames an eerie blue-white. Ghost whined, stepping back. Jon's heart pounded. His mind raced with questions. Was this the magic of the children? Was it connected to the Night King? Or something even older? He lifted the crown, and for the briefest moment, images flooded his head. Snowfields stretching beyond the horizon. Cities of black stone, warriors whose armor shone like the night sky. And behind them, a king with eyes that were not blue like ice nor red like fire, but deep silver watching him. Then the vision broke. Jon staggered, clutching the crown to his chest. He had no idea how long he'd been standing there, but when he finally looked back toward the tunnel, Ghost's ears were pricked toward the entrance. Someone else was down here. The sound of soft footsteps echoed from the dark, deliberate and slow. And then a voice he recognized all too well, deep, calm, but laced with suspicion. Torchlight in the oldest crypts? It was Samwell Tarly, but his expression wasn't friendly. It was wary. What happens next could decide whether the secret survives the night. Jon didn't answer right away. The crown was still cold in his hands, though it seemed to pulse faintly like it was aware of his touch. Sam's eyes darted to it instantly, and Jon saw the way his friend's breath caught, not in awe, but in recognition. Where did you find that? Sam's voice was quieter now, as though the crypt walls themselves might be listening. Jon hesitated. Here, buried deeper than I've ever been. He kept his tone low, steady, but Sam wasn't fooled. His gaze flicked between Jon and the eerie blue-white torchlight that still burned along the walls. That symbol... Sam stepped forward, fingers trembling. I've seen it before. Not in any of the Maester's books from Westeros. Those were scrubbed clean of it. But in a single text from Old Town, written in a language no one could fully translate. They called them First Kings, rulers before the first men even crossed the land bridge. Jon's brow furrowed. Older than the first men? That's not possible. Sam shook his head quickly. It's more than possible. It's dangerous. The Maesters, they didn't just forget these kings. They'd buried them. Entire dynasties erased. There were stories, whispers, about a pact with something beyond the wall. The first kings didn't just rule men. They ruled over what came before men. Jon felt the words cut deep. The visions he'd seen when his fingers brushed the crown now weighed heavier. And you think this crown proves I'm one of them? I think. Sam swallowed hard. If anyone finds out you're holding that, it won't just be Cersei or Daenerys after you. The Citadel will send assassins before dawn. Because if you are what I think you are, Jon, your claim makes every other throne in Westeros illegitimate." A cold silence hung between them. Ghost shifted uneasily, his eyes fixed on the darkness behind Sam. "Someone followed me here," Sam whispered suddenly, glancing over his shoulder. From the shadows, a slow, deliberate clap echoed down the tunnel. A figure emerged into the torchlight, graceful, controlled, and smiling like they'd just caught a secret worth killing for. "Varys, Lord Snow," he said silkily, "I do believe we need to have a private conversation. And here's where it gets insane, because what Varys knew could turn the entire Seven Kingdoms upside down before the night ended." Varys stepped closer, his footsteps soft, deliberate, as though each one was weighed for political effect. The flicker of the blue-white torches caught the glint in his eyes. Jon shifted slightly, the crown still hidden under his cloak, but Varys' gaze followed the movement like a hawk spotting prey. "I wonder," the spider murmured, "if the man who would never claim the throne might become the one man who could not refuse it." His words were silk, but every syllable carried a blade's edge. Jon's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested in thrones." Varys tilted his head, almost pitying him. "That's what makes you dangerous, Lord Snow. Men who want power can be predicted, controlled. But a man with a rightful claim who wants nothing, he becomes a symbol. And symbols topple empires." Sam shifted nervously, stepping closer to Jon, but Varys' attention didn't waver. "You think your Dragon Queen is feared now? Wait until the lords of Westeros hear that the blood in your veins predates hers by centuries, by dynasties. The North will rally to you without hesitation. The Riverlands will follow. And the Reach, well, the Reach has always loved a romantic story of a lost king." Jon's voice was steady, but his grip on the crown tightened. "And you? What do you want from me?" Varys' smile deepened. "To save the realm. Whether that means aiding you or destroying you will depend entirely on what you do next." Before Jon could answer, the ground shook faintly, dust sifting down from the ancient ceiling. A deep, guttural sound rolled through the crypt. Neither dragon's roar nor man's shout. Ghost bare his teeth, ears flat. The torches dimmed for a moment, their flames trembling as though something vast had moved somewhere far below them. Sam's voice was barely a whisper. That wasn't from above. Varys' smile faltered for the first time. His eyes flicked to the runes carved into the walls, then back to Jon. "Whatever you've touched here, Lord Snow, you've woken it." Above them, in the heart of Winterfell, a raven burst through the night sky toward the south, its message meant for Daenerys Targaryen. And when she read it, the war she was fighting in King's Landing would no longer matter. In the scorched streets of King's Landing, Daenerys stood on the balcony of the Red Keep, the night wind tugging at her silver hair. The raven's message was still in her hand, the parchment crumpled where her fingers had clenched. Her eyes moved over the words again, as if reading them a second time might change them. "A bloodline older than dragons. The North will crown him." Her pulse was sharp in her ears. Varys' name was not on the note, but she knew his handwriting as well as she knew betrayal when it stared her in the face. The ink bled into her thoughts, each word twisting tighter around her trust. Jon Snow, the man who bent the knee, who swore loyalty, who kissed her as if loyalty and love were the same thing. Had he been hiding this from her all along? Behind her, Tyrion stepped quietly into the chamber. "You summon me?" His eyes flicked to the parchment. "Is it about him?" Daenerys didn't turn. "It says, he carries a bloodline older than mine, that the North will rally to him, that the Seven Kingdoms will not accept me once they know." Her voice was controlled, but her grip on the parchment tightened until it tore slightly. Tyrion hesitated. "If that's true, if—" She spun on him, eyes bright with fire and suspicion. "Do you doubt it? Or do you doubt me?" Tyrion held her gaze, his mind already calculating. "I doubt the timing. I doubt the sender. This smells of Varys. And if Varys believes Jon's claim is stronger than yours, then Varys will die." The words came cold, certain, final. A long moment passed before Tyrion spoke again. If you act too soon, it will look like fear. She stepped closer to him, her voice low. It is not fear to kill those who would tear down everything I built. It is justice. But deep inside, a seed of something sharper than anger had already taken root. Doubt. Outside the city, in a dimly lit room above a dockside inn, Varys was already drafting a second message. Not to the lords of Westeros, not to the Reach, not even to the Vale. This one was bound for a place beyond the wall, and the one who would receive it hadn't been seen in years. The news reached Winterfell on the cold breath of dawn. Sansa Stark sat at the head of the high table. Letters spread before her like battle maps. The wax seals had been broken in haste. Some were still wet from melting ice. Arya stood at her shoulder, silent, arms crossed, her face a mask carved from the same northern stone as the walls around them. "It's spreading faster than wildfire," Sansa murmured, scanning another letter. "The Vale, the Riverlands, even White Harbor. They've all heard it. The Bloodline, older than the dragons, older than the Starks." Arya's voice was quiet but cutting. "And they think it makes him theirs." Sansa set the letter down, her eyes distant. "It makes him more than theirs. If this is true, Jon isn't just king in the north. He could be king of everything." Arya tilted her head, studying her sister. "You don't sound happy about that." "I'm not unhappy." Sansa's tone was measured. "I'm cautious. The North has bled for freedom. We buried brothers, fathers, sons for it. If Jon becomes a king over all 7 kingdoms, will the North still be free? Or will we just be another corner of his empire?" Arya's eyes narrowed. "You think he'd betray the North?" Sansa didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the next letter. This one was short. Only a single sentence scrawled in unfamiliar hand. "The crown is waking." Arya leaned closer, frowning. "What does that mean?" Before Sansa could respond, the heavy doors to the hall swung open. A half-frozen rider stumbled in, his cloak stiff with frost, his face pale from more than cold. "I rode from Last Hearth," he gasped. "Something's wrong beyond the wall. Lights in the sky. The old stones singing." The word hung in the air like a ghost. Sansa's eyes flicked to Arya's, but her sister's expression was unreadable. If the crown Jon found was truly waking something ancient, it wasn't just politics they had to fear. It was whatever had been buried long before dragons or men ruled the land. And somewhere deep beneath Winterfell, in the cold, dark chamber Jon had discovered, the crown pulsed faintly, as if keeping time with a heartbeat not its own. Jon rode hard for Winterfell, the weight of the crown wrapped in furs at his side, feeling heavier than any sword he'd carried into battle. Ghost kept pace at his flank, the direwolf's breath misting in the frigid morning air. Every mile north tightened the knot in his chest. He'd faced the dead, fought battles against impossible odds, but this was different. This was walking into a storm he might not be able to fight his way out of. The gates of Winterfell loomed ahead, black against the white snow. The guards let him pass without question, though their eyes lingered longer than usual, and whispers followed him into the courtyard. By the time he reached the great hall, Sansa was already there, seated like a queen in her own right, Arya standing beside her like a shadow with a blade. The fire behind them threw long, flickering light across the stone floor. "You've been busy," Sansa said, her voice cool. Jon removed his gloves, his eyes moving between his sisters. "You've heard." "We've heard enough," Arya replied, her gaze sharp. "Older than Targaryen, older than Stark. Is it true?" Jon didn't speak immediately. Instead, he reached into the folds of his cloak and placed the crown on the table between them. "It's strange." Dark metal drank in the firelight rather than reflecting it, and for a moment, the room seemed quieter. Sansa's eyes stayed on the crown. "You brought it here?" "It belongs here," Jon said. "The crypts, our crypts, kept it for a reason. This isn't about thrones. It's about the truth of who we are." Sansa looked up sharply. "Who you are. This bloodline, if it's real, changes everything. Every lord from here to Dorne will want a piece of you. Some will kneel, but more will want you dead. Do you understand the danger you put yourself in? The danger you put the North in?" Jon's voice was low, steady. Danger's been following me my whole life. This is different. This is calling to me. Arya stepped forward, eyes flicking to Crown, then back to Jon. And what happens when it calls to someone else? Before Jon could answer, the doors to the hall banged open again. A scout staggered in, snow crusted to his beard, his voice ragged from cold and fear. "They're moving," he gasped. "Not the dead. Something else. Shapes in the snow. Tall, black-armored, and they're heading south." Jon's hand went instinctively to Longclaw. The crown on the table seemed to hum, faintly but unmistakably. And in that moment, Jon understood, claiming this bloodline wasn't just about ruling. It was about surviving what was coming next. The storm rolled in from the far north faster than any blizzard Jon had ever seen. Snow tore sideways across the sky, blotting out the horizon, and within it, vague shapes moved with deliberate, unnatural precision. The scout's description hadn't been exaggerated. From the battlements of Winterfell, Jon watched as the figures emerged from the white. They were tall, half a head above the tallest man in the north, and their armor was like nothing forged in Westeros. Black, almost glass-like, but etched with faint, glowing runes that pulsed in time with each step they took. No swords hung from their hips. Instead, they carried long, curved spears tipped with a strange metal that shimmered blue-white, the same eerie hue of the torchlight in the crypt. They stopped just beyond bow range, unmoving, as though the storm itself had delivered them to Winterfell's gates. Sansa stood beside Jon, her furs pulled tight. "What are they?" she asked. Jon's voice was grim. "I don't know, but I've seen them before." Arya turned sharply. "When?" "In a vision," Jon said, his eyes never leaving the figures. "When I touched the crown." As if on cue, the crown, locked away in the great hall, began to hum again. The sound was faint at first, then sharper, almost like a low horn call. The black-armored warriors shifted in response, their heads tilting toward the keep. "They can hear it," Arya said, her voice low. From the center of the formation, one figure stepped forward. Its helmet bore a crest shaped like jagged peaks, the same design etched into the crown. It planted its spear into the snow and spoke in a language Jon didn't know, but somehow understood. "Firstborn, we have come for you." The wind howled louder, swirling around the warriors, but they didn't move any closer. They were waiting, not for battle, but for an answer. Sansa's voice was tight. "They're here for you." "Why?" Jon didn't answer right away. He felt again that strange pull in his blood, the same one that led him to Crypt. Only now it was stronger, demanding. The warriors weren't here to attack. They were here to summon. And if he refused, Jon had the terrible feeling Winterfell wouldn't see another dawn. The gates of Winterfell groaned as they swung open, the sound echoing through the courtyard like a warning bell. Snow swirled into the gap, biting at Jon's face as he stepped forward. Ghosts padded silently at his side, hackles raised, each breath of the direwolf misting in the frozen air. Above, the battlements bristled with northern archers, bows drawn but waiting on Jon's signal. The black-armored figures stood unmoving, their spears planted in the snow as though rooted there. The one with the jagged peak crest watched him approach, its faceless helm reflecting the gray light. As Jon closed the distance, the pull in his chest grew stronger, an invisible tether drawing him toward the leader. When he stopped a few paces away, the leader removed its helm with deliberate slowness. The face beneath was not what he expected. Pale as moonlight, eyes the same deep silver from his visions, and features eerily similar to his own. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. "Firstborn," the figure said again, but this time the words were in the common tongue, low and resonant. "We are the Oathbound. We serve the line that came before the world broke." Jon's throat tightened. "Why are you here?" "To return what was taken," the Oathbound leader said. His gaze flicked toward Winterfell's gates. "The crown calls to us. It knows its master. Without it, the pack will shatter, and what sleeps in the deep frost will wake fully." Jon glanced back at the walls. Sansa and Arya were silhouettes above, watching. "And if I refuse?" The leader's silver eyes darkened slightly. "Then the 7 kingdoms will burn from the north downward, and not even your dragons will stop it. The air shifted. No, stilled, as though the wind itself was holding its breath. Jon felt the truth of the words deep in his bones. He could hear it now, under the snow, under the earth. A slow, steady thrum, like the heartbeat of something vast. The Oathbound leader extended a gauntlet hand. Come with us, firstborn, or stand in our way and be the last of your line. Behind Jon, the great horns of Winterfell sounded 3 times. Not for wildlings, not for the dead, but for something new and possibly worse. The horn still echoed across the frozen fields when the first shadow passed overhead. Jon looked up to see wings slicing through the storm, massive, black against the gray-white sky. Drogon's roar split the air, followed by the sharper cry of Regal. Snow blasted sideways as the dragons descended just beyond the gates, their talons carving deep furrows in the ice. Soldiers on the walls shrank back. Even the Oathbound shifted their stance, spears tightening in their hands. Daenerys dismounted in a flurry of silver hair and white furs, her eyes already locked on Jon. Behind her, Unsullied fanned out, shields raised, spears ready, not toward the Northmen but toward the Oathbound. "What in the 7 hells are they?" she demanded, her voice carrying over the howling wind. Jon took a step toward her, but the Oathbound leader moved first. "The Pretender comes," he said, his voice like ice splintering. "This one claims Fire's throne, but her blood is young, thin. She is nothing to the first line." Daenerys' eyes narrowed dangerously. "And who are you to speak of thrones?" The leader turned his silver gaze on her. "We are the Oathbound. We served the first kings when dragons were yet unborn. We answer only to their blood, and it stands before us now." He inclined his head toward Jon. The words hit like a sword between them. Daenerys' jaw clenched, but her voice stayed steady. "Jon's bloodline, whatever story you wrap around it, doesn't change what is. I am queen of the 7 kingdoms. His loyalty is sworn to me." The Oathbound leader's tone didn't change. "Your kingdoms will kneel again to the one who came before you all. If he refuses, the pact will break, and the Deep King will rise." Jon's eyes moved between them. "If I go with you, what happens to Winterfell? To the north?" "They will be spared," the leader said simply. "For now." Daenerys stepped closer, her voice low but seething. "You don't know what they are, Jon. You don't know what they'll do to you. And I will not lose you to some ghost army built on old stories." Jon met her eyes, but the weight of the crown in his satchel seemed to pull at his very bones. Maybe the stories are the only thing keeping the rest of Westeros alive. For a long moment, no one moved. The snow fell thicker. The dragons hissed. The Oathbound waited. And then, far to the north, a rumble rose. Not thunder, not wind, but something deep and ancient shifting beneath the ice. Sansa's voice rang down from the walls. "Make your choice, Jon." And he knew that whatever decision he made would turn friend against friend and possibly doom them all. Jon's breath hung in the frozen air, each exhale feeling heavier than the last. The Oathbound silver-eyed leader waited like a statue, hand still extended. Behind him, Daenerys stood taut as a bowstring, every muscle ready to snap. The dragons rumbled low, steam curling from their nostrils. Above, the north watched in silence, archers, bannermen, and family, waiting to see if their king would step toward blood older than memory, or toward the queen he had sworn to follow. Jon's gaze swept the walls. Sansa's eyes were ice, calculating, assessing. Arya's hand rested lightly on the hilt of her blade, her face unreadable. Sam lingered in the shadow of the gatehouse, his worry plain even from a distance. All of them waited for the one thing Jon could not give them, certainty. He took a single step forward. Daenerys moved instantly, blocking his path, her voice sharp enough to cut through the storm. "If you walk past me, Jon Snow, you walk out of my protection." Jon met her gaze, unflinching. "Maybe your protection isn't what we need right now." The hurt in her eyes was fleeting, buried quickly beneath a wall of fire. "And what do you think they will give you? Glory? Power? You'll be a pawn in someone else's game." The Oathbound leader spoke, his voice carrying like steel on stone. "We do not play games." We fulfill oaths. The firstborn commands. We obey. Jon's fingers brushed the crown under his cloak. The hum grew louder in his ears, steady as a heartbeat. The visions flickered again. Cities of black stone, armies kneeling, the silver-eyed king watching from a throne that was not the Iron Throne. And behind it all, the shadow of something vast moving beneath the ice. He stepped around Daenerys. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't move aside. Instead, Drogon let out a roar that rattled the gates, his massive head lowering toward Jon, as if daring him to continue. The Oathbound did not flinch. Jon looked up at the dragon, then back at Daenerys. "You told me you'd break the wheel," he said quietly. "Maybe it broke long before you were born." And then he stepped into the storm, crossing the invisible line between Winterfell and the waiting Oathbound. The leader lowered his spear in a gesture of acknowledgement. The pact is sealed. The firstborn walks again. Behind him, Daenerys' voice rang out, hard and unyielding. "If he leaves with you, you are enemies of the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms." The leader's reply was simple. Then so be it. As the Oathbound began their march northward with Jon among them, a deep cracking sound rolled across the frozen plains. Far beyond the wall, the ice split, and the first shadow of the Deep King stirred beneath. The storm swallowed them the moment Winterfell's walls vanished behind. Snow lashed at Jon's face, biting through fur and leather, but the Oathbound moved as if the cold meant nothing. Their formation never wavered, black armor cutting sharp lines against the endless white. Ghost trotted close to Jon's side, ears flicking at the strange rhythm of their march. Each step perfectly in unison, as if guided by a single heartbeat. Hours bled into a blur of ice and wind. Jon tried to speak to the leader more than once, but the only answers came in short, weighted sentences. "You will see soon. The path remembers your blood. The ice will open." By the second night, the snow stopped falling. The air grew unnaturally still, heavy with a silence so deep Jon could hear the slow rasp of his own breath. The horizon ahead shimmered faintly, not with light, but with something darker, shadows that seemed to pulse against the white. They crested a rise, and Jon's steps slowed. Below lay a vast expanse of cracked ice, each fissure glowing with a faint, sickly blue. At its center rose a black spire, jagged and unnatural, piercing the sky like a spear. Around it, the ice steamed faintly, though the air was colder than any winter Jon had felt. The Oathbound leader stopped. "The Deep King stirs." Jon's gut tightened. "And you brought me here?" "You woke him the moment you claimed the crown," the leader replied. "Only the firstborn can bind him again, or free him." Jon's grip tightened on Longclaw. "And what happens if I choose wrong?" The leader's silver eyes didn't blink. Then the wall falls and the world follows. Before Jon could speak again, the ice beneath the spire groaned, a deep, ancient sound that vibrated in his bones. Cracks spidered outward in every direction. From within the largest fissure, a glow surged upward. Not blue like the others, nor gold like fire, but something older, colder, a light that felt like the absence of warmth itself. The Oathbound sank to one knee as the glow grew brighter. "He comes." Jon's breath caught. In the shifting glow, a shape began to rise, taller than giants, draped in black ice, eyes like silver fire. And though Jon had never seen him before, a whisper in his blood told him the truth. This was no stranger. This was kin, back in Winterfell. Daenerys stood before her war council, maps spread across the table. Her voice was iron. "We march north. If Jon has joined something older than dragons, then he's no longer my ally. He's my enemy." The ice split wide with a sound like the world itself breaking. Steam and frost burst upward, spiraling around the black spire as the figure within rose higher, shedding shards of frozen stone like falling stars. Jon's breath misted in shallow bursts, his body frozen not by cold, but by the weight of recognition he didn't understand. The Deep King's face emerged from shadow, tall, sharp-boned, his skin a pale that seemed to drink the light, eyes the same silver fire as Jon's visions. His voice rolled through the air like the groan of glaciers moving after centuries. "Blood of my blood, you have woken me." Jon's fingers flexed around Longclaw's hilt. "Were you?" The Deep King's gaze lingered, searching him. I am what was before men took the world, before dragons burned it. I am the first ruler of this land, and you are my heir." Jon swallowed hard. If that's true, why call me here? To bind the pact again, or to break it forever? The Deep King's eyes shifted toward the Oathbound kneeling around them. They have kept my throne empty for an age. But the ice weakens. The fire rises. The will you spoke to the Dragon Queen. It was mine long before hers. Jon's heart pounded. The words rang with the weight of truth, but also with a promise of something dangerous. And if I refuse? The Deep King stepped forward, his massive frame sending cracks racing across the ice. Then the snows will not stop at the wall. They will cover every green field until the world is white again. Before Jon could answer, a distant roar echoed across the plains. Not the deep call of dragon, but two, shrieking in challenge. Black shapes appeared in the sky, growing larger with each wing beat. Drogon and Rhaegal cut through the clouds, frost trailing in their wake. Behind them, spears of unsullied banners flapped in the freezing wind. At the head of the force, Daenerys rode hard, her white fur snapping in the gale, her eyes locked on the black spire. The Oathbound leader rose to his feet. "The Fire Queen comes. Choose now, firstborn, will you stand with blood or with fire?" The Deep King's gaze bored into him. "Kneel, and I will make the world yours. Stand against me, and I will bury it." The dragons roared again, closing the distance fast. The storm between ice and fire was about to break. The wind screamed across the frozen expanse as fire met ice. Drogon and Rhaegal dove low, their wings kicking up blizzards of snow and shards of ice. The Oathbound closed ranks around Jon, their black armor gleaming in the strange light from the cracks below. The Deep King stood unmoving at the center, his gaze fixed on the approaching queen like he had seen her kind before, and ended them. Daenerys brought Drogon to a hovering halt, the dragon's claws carving deep grooves into the ice. Her voice carried over the roar of the wind. "Jon Snow, step away from him." Jon didn't move. The crown at his side pulsed harder, the hum in his blood rising to a near-painful pitch. The Oathbound leader leveled his spear toward Drogon. "Leave this place, Fire Queen. You do not belong to the pact." "Neither do you," Daenerys shot back. "If your pact means bringing back another tyrant to rule." The Deep King's voice rolled like an avalanche. "I ruled before your dragons were eggs. Before your blood was even dreamed of. You burned the world to rule it. I freeze it to preserve it. Which is kinder?" Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "You're just another ruler who thinks the world belongs to them. I've broken those before." "Then try," the Deep King said, lifting one hand. The ice at his feet shattered outward in a ring, sending jagged shards taller than a man spearing into the air. The shockwaves staggered the Unsullied. Even Drogon faltered in flight. Jon gritted his teeth. "Stop, both of you." But neither listened. Drogon roared, unleashing a torrent of fire toward the Deep King. The flames struck an invisible wall of frost, hissing and boiling into steam. The temperature plummeted so fast the air burned to breathe. The Oathbound surged forward, their spears clashing against unsullied shields. Rhaegal swept low, scattering warriors with the force of his wings, but three Oathbound leapt impossibly high, their spears grazing his flank and leaving trails of frostbite along his scales. Jon's mind raced. Every instinct screamed to protect his people, but both sides were his people now. The crown at his side burned cold against his ribs, its unbuilding into a voice only he could hear. "Choose, firstborn." Daenerys was already urging Drogon forward for another strike, her face set in grim resolve. The Deep King was drawing the cold into himself, preparing something worse than the wall of frost. Jon realized in that moment, whichever way he turned, one side of this war would end forever.